And here we are. It is another edition of the Spoiler Room. Thank you so much, folks, for coming on down, pulling up a chair, and listening to us gab and discuss and hobnob about films. And tonight, we've got an interesting one from 1996, and it is Set It Off. And tonight, I've got a crew member joining me tonight to talk about this very interesting action drama, I guess you could deem it as. And it's none other than the lovely Andrew Shearer is once again joining us in the spoiler room. Hello, Andrew. How are you, sir?
Hey man, it is lovely to be lovely, and thank you for wanting to talk about this movie. This is one of my favorite ones.
Is it really?
Yeah,
Awesome.
man. I watched it on election night last year.
Oh, that's a good way, especially considering the election. That's not a bad way to spend that
Yeah,
night.
when I saw how things were going, I was like, you know what? I need something I could set it off with.
Well, this film definitely does that. And Andrew, you do these so well. If you don't mind at all, would you mind telling our listeners what Set It Off is about?
Okay, well, Set It Off is from 1996, directed by F. Gary Gray, and it is about four desperate women in a desperate situation that take desperate measures to get themselves out, but only get deeper into desperation.
Nice. I like that. And yeah, it does. Directed by a very talented director. And man, I tell you, it had been a long time. I think I had seen this film, when it because it had hit cable run, after it came out for a while.
Mhm.
Um, and I think I caught it once, but didn't remember much about it. But this film opens it like, I mean, it lets you know what you're in for. This film does not pull any punches with this opening where we get, I believe it is the Frankie
Mhm.
character, Vivica Fox.
Yep.
Um, her character is working at a bank and it's being robbed. And it's being robbed. One of the people robbing it is someone she knows.
Yes.
And you think in the beginning with the way the exchange is going, you're like, oh, she's kind of going to talk him out of it or whatnot. But no, shit goes south quick.
Yeah.
Andrew, what'd you think about this opening with the guys and I mean blowing away the person right in front of her? I mean, holy crap.
Yeah, it is like you got to remember the before this F. Gary Gray's movie was Friday. Like the year before this he made Friday, which is a comedy classic, one of the best movies of the 90s. And so for him to and you think about it now, it's like the parts of Friday that are intense,
Mm-hmm.
where Big Worm kind of comes back through and they begin to fire through the neighborhood, and Smokey and Craig are laying in the back of that. I guess it's either the back of a truck or back of an El Camino or something, while the bullets are going over them. There are some serious moments in that, but I still don't think there was any indication that this guy was going to be able to next year crank out a movie this intense. I really believe that Frankie and her friend there that's robbing the bank, that situation would be like the climax of a movie that was just about her. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And you know just enough about her to know that this is right away a horrifying moment, and you don't need to like have to get to know her for an hour, but it would have been cool. But this is just like the way they set up each character in this movie is brilliant, but it's the pre-title sequence, and it gets, yes, the movie is very violent, but not like irresponsibly so.
No.
It goes about as bad as a bank robbery could possibly go, but to have the teller with blood on her face because this guy that she knows, because at first she's like, "Hey, man, I've never seen you in a bank before." She's joking around with him, and he's like, "Do I look like I'm kidding?" And he like, he's not only is he serious enough and desperate enough himself to rob a bank, but he kills a hostage right in front of her, just blood everywhere.
Yeah, that it was intense and it you're right. It is a perfect setup and it's like something like you're like, wow, okay, we just dive right into this, and it would be
Yeah.
something like a climax of another film that would be about her. I like how you put that because, yeah, that's the way it feels. But the way he sets this up, you get all the information you need about her character right in those moments, right in
Yeah.
that dialogue.
Vivica Fox is such a great actor. Everybody is, but you think about it in terms of like drive-ins or of like the tough kind of crowd coming to see it, or if you wanted to call Set It Off exploitation, which in a way it kind of is. That's how you do it. You give them some, you give them something right up front, so they're like, whoa, and so you can then lay into the character development and not have people kind of getting restless, wondering where you're going. It's an old technique, but it
Mhm.
totally works when done properly.
Yeah, and here it is done properly. I mean, the sequence is directed to where you're you immediately feel for her character. You feel for the Frankie character like within the first few minutes, and getting that connection like that helps with this first act so much because you connect with her, and right after this, man, you I don't know, Andrew, you know what? It really is sad. And this don't mean to get real serious on the show, but it's true. It is sad that you look at all these situations because you, with each one of these ladies we're introduced to, they're faced with a situation that's still a problem today.
Oh
And
yeah.
this film's 20 years old. Here she is, blood on her from a hostage in this office being interrogated by the white cop and with the white boss standing there.
Mhm.
And because she knew the guy from the projects, they're immediately saying, "Oh, well, they immediately think she's in on it."
Yeah.
I mean, she's got blood on her face, she's shaking, and she's trying to keep it together, and they're immediately like, "Oh," and then right there, the boss goes, yeah, we're gonna have to let her go." I'm like, "Fuck."
Yeah, you get fired while you still got the blood on you from this situation, and boy, she lets him have it.
Oh, she does. I loved when she laid into him.
Yeah.
That was like, yes. But I mean, within this 5-10 minutes of this film, you are connected with the Frankie character. I love how they did this because and you think maybe she is going to be kind of the main line that you follow through, like some of these stories that you have where you have 4 characters. There's still kind of the leader or main character, but and we'll get to the other characters in a minute. I never felt like there was any one character dominating completely over the group over the other. Did you, Andrew?
No, I didn't, and it's kind of brilliant, the way that they do that because the whole crux of this movie is these women do some criminal stuff. I mean, they're bank robbers, and so there's been throughout the history of film, there's been a lot of movies where the criminals are the people who you are supposed to be rooting for. And in order to do that, they had to make these people realistic enough and believable enough, yet still likable enough to where you as the audience go, would I do that? Or if I were them, would I do that? Or you know what I mean? It's that whole time, if you don't connect with them, if you don't empathize, I mean, anybody that's had a crappy job or been accused of stealing, which that's happened to me, or just anybody who's like, work is rough enough. Life is rough enough. I don't need this. And just imagine one more thing, or everybody's just like one illness or car accident away from just complete financial devastation, most people. And so for you to then support this idea of them turning to crime, you've got to, you know what I mean? It's the movie's job to make sure that you know these people really well and you're on their side.
And they set it up in this first act so well because if you didn't think it was bad for Frankie to have blood and bits of whatever hostage on you and then
Mhm.
get fired that same hour, then we've got Jada Pickett Smith's character, Stony, who she's trying to raise her brother because their parents died, and she's hurting for some money. So she ends up having to do something. Oh man. And I loved the setup with all these characters because they did not have these characters do these decisions likely.
No.
And her decision to get in that car with the sleazy salesman, uh man, you feel for her. You just connect with that character as well. Did you feel that way, Andrew?
Yeah, I mean, let's just say it. I mean, she has sex with somebody in order to get money,
Right.
and she's doing it because her brother needs money to go to college, and she desperately wants him to have a better life, and desperately wants him to get out of where they live. And of course, later we find out that there's more to his situation than he told her. And man, what a break that is after all this.
Oh
And she
yeah.
lets him have it too. But the scene, there's a shot where they show her. They just cut to her doing what she's chosen to do, and all you see is this close up of this guy's back and him kind of grunting, and just the vacant look on her face, and then the walk she does, then the
Yeah.
wide shot leaving that guy's house. There's nothing sexual about it. There's nothing sexy about it. There's nothing funny about it. But yet it just feels like that must be what that's like to have to be that, to have to resort to something like that.
Yeah, and again, here we have our second character, and they set it up to where you can see why they decided to go the route they did with the bank robbery.
Yes.
And I was like, I'm watching this going, man, you know what? I don't blame these I don't blame these ladies a bit.
No.
I'm rooting for them because
Yeah.
of this all the situations they're in. I mean, you get Kimberly Elise's character, TT, who is struggling to keep her kid babysitter, and all the ladies, eventually Stoney ends up working for him as well, but Cleo, Cleo, Stoney, and TT all work for this cleaning guy who doesn't
Luther.
treat them any. I mean, you might let's face it. There's people that might make assumptions just because he is African American as well, that they all, it's one group, but he treats them like crap too.
Yeah, that's Thomas Bird. He's been in a lot of Spike Lee movies, but he plays Luther, their boss, and he's always busting on Cleo because she's a lesbian. Like
Yeah.
he always refers to her as sir or him or it's just
Gentlemen.
yeah, gentlemen. Yeah, he's just so upfront and rough with it. And this was before Queen Latifah was out too, like in real life.
Yeah, it was before that, and it's interesting because you're not quite sure what he was getting at first, and I kind of liked how he played at that with Queen Latifah's character Chloe, because when you first meet her, he goes, "Ladies and gentlemen," and you're like,
Right.
"Gentlemen, what?
Why is he saying? Yeah.
Why is he saying gentlemen?" And then we get the scene later on where they're all hanging out by Cleo's car, and then you realize why.
Yeah, but they do butch her up pretty good though,
Yeah. Yeah. Oh yeah, they do. But I mean, she's an amazing actress. All these actresses are fantastic in this movie, and I've always liked Queen Latifah's acting, and she plays Cleo. Cleo's a tough one too, who actually has, she out of the three ladies, she's the one that has had some experience breaking the law. Because she used to lift cars.
Yep.
But she's also the first one that's like, yeah, let's go rob a bank.
Yeah, you need that person in the group. That's what makes it believable to go from, employed people and, mother of child to robbing banks. You need that one person in there. It's just like, the enabler. And that's who Cleo is. She enables them.
Oh, she's totally the enabler, and her challenge, that's all her motivation is. She is in a tough situation as well. I mean, being in the mid 90s, being a lesbian, and that still was, that's still not quite looked high upon at all, or at all.
Well, they've also known each other since, they were in grade school at least, or high school, and they're all stuck in this place they can't get out of. None of them really want to be there. So if that's not motivation enough in and of itself, things just go from bad to worse. And I think TT has the worst because of her kid. and anybody who has a child or knows a child has to like feel for this because she has to bring the kid to work with her because she can't get afford the babysitter, and the kid gets into some cleaning products as they go to the emergency room, so defects takes the kid away.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not fantasy at all what we're seeing here.
No, every one of their situations is stuff that is real life
Yes.
going on right now. And it sets up the motivation for these characters to where, like you said, it's believable. It's got to be believable for you to stick with these characters and actually want them to get away with bank robbery.
Yes.
And it also, I liked how he handled that too, because their first bank robbery, not all four of them do it.
No, oh, poor TT, like, and it's not a surprise.
Well,
She backs out and she's like, I can't do it. But what's crazy is they're like standing there and about to go into the lobby, and they're looking so suspect, putting wigs on, sunglasses, and nobody's, I'm saying, this is the bank. They're gonna get away with it because no one notices.
no one bothers pay attention. I mean, they're walking in with wigs and they don't even have all their wigs on yet or the sunglasses, and people just walking by completely ignoring them like, oh, whatever.
Yeah.
It's like, wow. But yeah, TT, but I think I got the impression that TT was just a little bit younger than the rest of them, even though they all grew up together.
Yeah, and this is a great casting too, because Kimberly Elise, this was her first movie, and of course she went on to. Well, I know her best from Beloved, which I watched last year, but it was also from just a few years later. So it's one of the most frightening movies I've ever seen in my life. Really long, but worth it. But this was the first thing. If it's not her first movie, it's the first time I ever saw her do anything. But she is so great at playing that. Everybody in the audience needs to maybe kind of identify some way, and they make them different enough to where you could go like, that would be me. I would be so worried about everything and so chicken and just so afraid I would be the one to cry. But later, this is when they have to pick one for something really awful to happen to, you want it to be the most innocent of them and the most sympathetic. And that is why they set her up to seem like she's the youngest, because
Yeah.
when that happens, it's awful upon awful.
Yeah, and it's interesting what they do with her character a little later on, after they've started their kind of life of crime. Later on, she ends up being the one out of everybody. She ends up being the one that takes a life,
Mm-hmm.
which is again, yeah, like you said, a message of the final drop of innocence goes away at that point.
Yeah.
In that group. And that's where the movie changed too, because the second act is really them doing their bank robberies, and you're kind of cheering for them, and they're getting away. No one's really getting hurt. They have that big score, which like what, $250,000.
Yeah, that one's intense. The first score is like, what you hope is that they get enough from that first one where they don't have to rob another bank, but it's nothing. Like it's just a like, I don't know, like $5,000 total what they get. I don't know.
It was 12 grand
grand.
total, so
Right.
$3,000 of each of them.
Yeah,
But
that's not going to do much. So they
No.
have to step things up and do things a little more. But what I thought was cool, they do introduce a love interest, and it is one of the hardest working dudes ever, Blair Underwood. We just talked about him last time I talked to you. He was Carver in Posse.
Yeah. Blair Underwood was everywhere.
He was everywhere, dude. That never gets talked about. Denzel gets talked about the most because he got all the awards, but Blair Underwood, he put in all the work, and so he's like he works at the bank, and Stoney he takes an interest in her, so she develops a relationship with a dude working at a bank while she's robbing banks. Great.
Well, yeah, and it has her, and here she's met a guy in Blair Underwood's character, Keith Weston. She's met a guy who seems legitimately interested in her, even though they're from two different backgrounds, completely. And she's kind of taken aback by that, and not quite sure how to approach that, but she's still got her loyalty to her girls in the end. but she does struggle with that at times. And I thought that was interesting, though, how she kind of changed her mind because she's found a different way out, but you can tell she's fighting not thinking that way.
Yeah, but she hit bottom early on. 'Cause what we didn't mention is that her brother, who she got all that money for to go toward college, he ends up being murdered by the police because they think he was responsible for that bank robbery that happens in the beginning because he's got his head shaved in the same design as the guy that robbed the bank. Let me ask you a question about that, man, if you don't mind.
No, go ahead.
I cannot remember the guy's name, but he's been in a bunch of stuff too. He was in Menace to Society and then parodied that role in Don't Be a Menace. God, I can't think of his name, but his face is so familiar. He kind of is the mastermind of the bank robbery. He gets away, and later you find out he's friends with Stoney's brother, and you're like, oh no, what's gonna happen here? He's got like Acorn Projects shaved into his head. And he's like, tells this girl in there, why don't you shave his head too? And she's like, he's not from here. And he's like, that doesn't matter. And when she takes him away to shave his head, and you're not necessarily thinking what's going to happen, there's this shot of him looking like knowingly. Do you think he had her shave his buddy's head to look like his so that so that might actually happen? So that the cops might see him instead and bust him for the robbery?
That was my immediate thought.
Okay. God, what a jerk, dude.
That was my immediate thought, because at first,
terrible.
At first you'd think, oh, they're just, buddies in the rough, we, in all honesty, when I grew up on 37th and Galena, there were a couple guys I know that were not into like heavy shady stuff, but I knew some guy, even though at my age, I still knew a couple kids who were doing some things for their brothers or whatnot. But anyway, but you think it's that kind of friendship where they know the one guy's into shady business, but they're still good friends and they hang out and don't talk about it much and just kind of enjoy each other's company and whatnot. And you think that at first, but then he drops off that suggestion of doing the AP in the back of his, shaving that in the back of his head. And you're like, oh shit.
Yeah.
He's setting him up because of the way this guy, because if you notice during the bank robbery, he was the one closest to the door.
Yeah. No, they telegraphed this whole thing, but I just wanted to make sure that I felt like all the clues were there because the police focus on the AP thing. So they got that information. They were looking for somebody with that shaved in their head.
Right. And Lorenz, he's played by Samuel Monroe Jr.
Okay. Samuel Monroe Jr. He's been in I don't see him much anymore, but back then he was in a lot of like this type of stuff. But he also, like I said, in Don't Be a Menace, he made fun of it too. He parodied his own role from Menace to Society.
But too, he's smart enough to know that he's probably under watch.
Yes.
He's under watch. Here he's got this guy who's connected with his sister who worked at the bank that he robbed. And word traveled already through where they live, through their neighborhood, of what happened to Frankie.
Yeah.
So he knows that connection. I mean, the guy, unfortunately, is a perfect mark.
Yeah, I'm sorry to jump around, but I forgot about that. I meant to ask you when we were talking about it. It's like, God, that not only puts Stoney in like, true desperation. Not only did she have sex to get this money, but then finds out that, she got it kind of in vain. And then their parents are already dead, and our brother's dead too, and the cops killed him. So you got this guilt of the police, which I thought was interesting because John McGinley, who's played a jerk in a million movies, is like the detective that's on the case, and he genuinely feels horrible about them having killed. Don't you get the feeling that he feels really bad that the cops killed this guy?
Oh yeah, I mean, you can tell this is a guy who is driven by duty, but at the same time, especially in that scene, you can tell he's just like, no. He's just constantly saying, he's like, he just knows it is, you actually feel like he does feel bad. He genuinely feels bad for the situation.
Yeah, he's not the stereotypical dickhead white cop, although they could have had him play that. They are actually going for a little bit more with it, which I thought was really cool. It gave a little bit of an angle, and didn't necessarily let him off the hook, but it didn't just paint in broad strokes, and that's good because nothing in this movie does. There's gray area with everybody.
There is gray area, and with him, you're not quite sure where he sits because at one, he sits there and he wants to catch him, but at the same time, he plays it very well to where you think there's another layer to him. He's not just the a-hole white cop trying to bust these ladies. He actually has a layer to him where you could tell part of him, just a small part, is like, I don't quite blame him. I still need to bring you in, you know. And again, it comes up especially later on when they finally catch up with one another. It's his partner, Detective Waller, who's just gung-ho about getting rid of these four ladies. I mean, she's like just no nonsense, like, yeah, let's get them.
She was I don't know her name, but she was in this show called Rock with Charles S. Dutton back then. She was, I guess she was his wife. Man, she was good. I can't remember the actress's name, but this movie's, I mean, it's super 90s. It's got all kind of 90s stuff to it, and we'll talk about some of it as we go, I'm sure, but like the casting is fantastic, and there's not like anybody that's kind of just in there as a stand-in. They got great people for everyone. But yeah, they could have made the cops be just really really kind of wooden and one-dimensional, but they didn't.
No, and I was kind of glad to see it that way, and actually a little surprised because you kind of expect that from a film like this, this type of story. You do kind of expect that, and so to do that with the cop, I thought was really interesting, and it carries throughout this whole film, especially as we get into the third act, where of course things have to start falling apart.
Yes.
Because they're doing bad things. And that's the thing that I thought was interesting. They kept in this film. It's still that film formula. Even though you're rooting for these people, you're rooting for these characters and and you see where they're coming from and what they want to do to try to get out of their situation and how far they've gone. But at the same time, you realize they're still doing bad things.
Yes.
And in the end, there's gonna be pay. The devil will have his due at the end of the film, and it's heartbreaking.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, but you just never. The movie just moves at such a clip, and your heart is with these people as you're going through the whole thing. All the performances are just so good, and as like the stakes get higher and higher, and you realize that like you still think they'll get away, you still think there's a way out to it, and up through the end, up through the very end, you still think, man, okay, we're not out of it yet. You're in the same, it puts you in the same mindset as the characters. I think it, completely successful.
Oh, by the time you get to that big score that they want, which ends up being knocking over the bank that Stoney's boyfriend works at, for the big score, when you get to that point, you think still that, they could get away with this.
Yeah, how about Cleo's getaway driving techniques?
Oh man. She needs a battery ram on everything.
Dude, because she's like the wheelman, like was that the last job they pull where she just like drives the car or the van or whatever it was, like right through the bank wall, and
before the final one. Yeah, the second last one is the one where the cops, it's interesting, they're the another bank that they decide to rob. They get up in their and there's a drunk outside the a bank, and so the security officer is distracted by that, which helps them at first. The only problem is while the ladies are inside knocking over the bank, Cleo's out in the car, and suddenly the real cops show up, not just security guard, but the actual black and whites show up. So she kind of hides, and she steals a car, a truck, and drives it through the back of the bank.
It's great, isn't it, man? And the whole time you're thinking like, man, they're going to run someone over. It is amazing that they do not just mow anybody down. but they caused some car accidents. But as far as I could tell, they never squished anybody.
No, they didn't actually hit anybody either. No, because she smashes through on an angle and manages to cause two cars to crash, so the cops can't even follow them because they're like, "What the hell?" You know, they're trying to shake down a crazy guy out in the street, and suddenly this truck comes crashing through the bank window.
Yeah.
And they made off with that was where they made their big score, but greed kind of got in the way a bit.
And that was when they tried to stash the money, but then their boss Luther made off with it, right?
Right. Yep.
Okay.
And that's the thing is they never quite established it, but you've pretty much figured Luther got away with it. He just didn't give the money up. Because after that score, they're actually going to go out. They made $250,000. That's it. They're done. They hide that money, and suddenly they find out Luther took it, and that's pretty much where things just take a dive for all four of them.
Yeah.
Because him taking that money is they track him down to where he's in this hotel with this lady who
a woman of the evening, let's say.
A woman of the evening, you suspect, and they're trying to interrogate him and shake him down, and he brings out a gun and pulls it on Stoney. I think it was it or
Cleo?
Yeah. It was and that's where TT shoots him. So out of the four ladies who you think would shoot someone, you would think Cleo would be the first one to actually shoot someone.
Yes, and the way that they do that, the shot that they do is amazing because you see him like pop and you hear it, and then he drops out of from camera and you see TT standing there with the gun and the look on her face. Holy shit. It's a great reveal. You've seen that done a million times where someone shoots someone and they can't believe they shot him, or it's a surprise who shoots who. But the way they do that is so great for that character. It's so cool.
And the look on her face too, the way she plays that too, you're like, she was saving her friend.
Yeah.
You know, it was that scene was intense. I mean, you get a number of intense scenes like that, and then that's when things start to really head not well for them, because now you've got a murder on their hands, which motivates the cops further, and they've got the money, and Cleo was spending money before, which kind of got attention to her.
But she tricked out her car, which was worth it.
Oh yeah, that car. Oh, I love that car. I saw that car like, oh man.
Yeah, it's a nice lowrider. It's got some really good hydraulics when she's like punking her girlfriend when she first shows up with it.
Yep.
She tries to grab the handle and she lets it drop.
Yeah, I mean, there's humorous moments in here too, and there's some touching moments. I thought one of the things I really thought they handled well was the whole Stoney and the Stoney and Keith Watson relationship, though.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't just have these characters immediately hook up or immediately, like, oh my God. Stoney still eases into it, and I liked that. I liked that there was still hesitation, and it wasn't just okay, let's go. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it gives some stakes, and it also makes you feel like, well, someone's got a key, like a line into a better life, and although everyone deserves to have some kind of a break, you gotta admit Stoney deserves it the most.
Oh God, yeah. I mean,
so
her
for
character.
Her to have,
yeah, go ahead.
For her to have someone take interest in her is just like has these wake up moment, like, you mean me?
Yeah.
So it was really good.
Stoney could probably detect bullshit a mile away, and she's like, this guy actually seems genuine.
Yeah.
Which makes her doing, the robberies or the decision to do a robbery even tougher. But yet, Frankie, I tell you, Frankie goes through a scary transformation in this film, though.
She does. She has to kind of catch herself, because at first, and she's gone through extreme trauma. She and Stoney both have, and then of course TT losing her kid to DFACS. All of them have seen some like really serious trauma. But Frankie, like the way she reacts to it, she just goes from like she starts to kind of lose herself in it, personality wise, and that's, I think, fight or flight. I guess a lot of times,
Yeah, I mean,
PTSD also.
she ends up starting to come off even scarier than Chloe because Chloe's just all into this, but Frankie, she just comes out. It's like, wow,
Yeah.
it's like holy cow, she just went hardcore.
Yeah, they gave these women so many great things to do, and everybody gets their like, their real big freak out moment, and
Mhm.
also everybody gets like, they get it's all dignified all the way through. And you got to keep in mind when we're watching this, no, they'd never made a movie like this before.
No,
Female black bank robbers. Even though the early 90s was, pretty much littered with a lot of what we would call like gangster type movies, like the modern gangster type movies, and a lot of them were kind of messagey, but mostly violent, and it was unheard of to see something like this. And so for anyone to like kind of misstep with it and make them into stereotypes would have been a bad idea. But I think what Gary was trying to do was going like, I'm taking these female characters and these women who are normally like either like the supportive one in a plot about a man or the victimized one in a plot about a man or both. And the usual female roles, or even more the point, the black female roles of these kind of movies, and put them front and center and have them be the heroes, and let them have the spotlight. It was amazing to me, and I can't think right away of another time where something like this has been done.
not like this. No, or
Or they
shouldn't
cheese it
say.
or camp it up.
That's what I was going to say is done seriously.
Yeah.
Stuff like this has been kind of tried later on, but it's more shticky, as I call it. More like you said, campy. It kind of a bit tongue in cheek, or if they do try to bring it serious, they just go over they just do it wrong.
Yeah, it's preachy like a Tyler Perry movie or something, and
it,
you wouldn't
it
get your
gets
action and adventure.
yeah, it gets more. It doesn't get like this. This is an amazing film that they made like this, and the way it's handled in the script and everything. And in that third act where they're knocking over the bank, the big huge bank, and you almost think they're getting away with it. And then the cop who's been following him the whole time and his partner catch up. And that's what surprised me was him stopping and trying to talk them down. They didn't just go right into it where his partner wants to shoot them, but
Yeah.
he's like, no, let's do this. We know where and they're all about to put the guns down, at least except Chloe, who's just like, what the hell? And we get that dumbass security guard who comes out and shoots, of all people, TT.
Yeah, but she's the one who has shot someone.
Right.
So it's like the justice system of the film is now being kind of meted out, because you don't want to condone criminal behavior. That would have been like an irresponsible thing for the film to do, even though history is full of westerns and other gangster pictures where crime is glorified. They were careful not to do that, but we didn't necessarily mention explicitly was that his partner is a black woman too.
Yes.
But yeah,
Yeah.
for that guy to come and put one in TT, were you like at any time, did you think like any of these actors, any of these four women could potentially be killed at any time? Because I know that when we talked about Black Panther a few nights ago, you're saying like, well, there's no element of danger really, because Black Panther, the T'Challa is not going to get cursed. He's the hero.
Right.
But this movie being played as realistically as it was in the ensemble, any of these women, you hope nothing happens to them. And like you said, you thought maybe if anybody would be the one to commit the violence, it would be Cleo. Were you afraid for all of them? Did you think anyone could get shot?
Yeah. I mean, at any one of those bank robberies, I was fully expecting us to get that scene where one of them ends up getting shot because, especially where they had the one where TT was actually acting like one of the bank patrons.
Yes.
and that guy has concealed carry. That guy was about to pull a gun out, and I'm like, ah, shit. Well, here we go. Before you see TT next to him, you're like, yep, here it comes. The one where the reality check comes in for your characters, because you do get that in a lot of these movies where there's the reality check. They've been doing good so far, but then one of them gets shot or seriously hurt, and then it's like, oh man, they start to question what they're doing. And you get that feeling with every crime that they commit in this, that you're waiting for that moment, actually.
Yeah.
And have it happen at the tail end of their, quote unquote, their last job, to her specifically, like out of the blue, because the way he sets that up, there's no lead in to you thinking that someone's actually going to get just blown away. You think, oh, we're going to resolve it like this, and it's going to, they're going to be, put in handcuffs and they'll be taken out and lesson learned. And no, this guy comes out and blows one of them away, and it's like, oh shit.
Yeah.
Even the cop, the way the guy was like, oh shit.
Yep.
He knew what was going to happen.
Yeah.
And then from there, it just gets insane.
It does, man. Well, they ramp up the action, and you could see this guy has a future as an action director, or and a drama director too. But I mean, he went on to do like Italian Job, Negotiator, one of the Fast and Furious ones. God, he did one with Denzel. I can't remember the name of it. It was really violent, like almost torture-y. And then of course, Straight Outta Compton, which was just amazing. And we should mention that Dr. Dre's first movie role also, I think, is in this film. He plays the arms supplier, Black Sam.
Yeah, and I really thought that's the way they handled this third act interesting as well, is because we have that shootout and them getting in the car and they take off, and then we cut to him and his crew sitting there watching on the news.
Mm-hmm.
And suddenly we realize we've had some time pass.
Yeah.
It's night and they're being chased by cops with helicopters. Like, holy crap. But we didn't see all of that buildup. I liked how he did that to where suddenly you just jump in and they're like desperation mode now.
Yeah, but you still have no clue how it's going to resolve itself. It feels like kind of like the real thing, And of course, I think them showing Dre was funny because he himself, I think, was around that time had gotten in some trouble with the police, and there may have been helicopters involved. He wasn't always the billionaire he is now. He was struggling with some of that. So that was funny. I remember at the time, people kind of laugh at that. His reaction to that was kind of like a wink or a nod to that. But
sure,
you really don't. You really are kind of glued to it. I mean, how involved are you at this point when you were watching?
I mean, I'm fully invested. I mean, the heartbreaking where they have to leave. She'd been shot and she passes like that, and you feel their emotion. They're just like shit. But you're attached to all these characters at this point. There's a part of you, even though they've committed, even everything that you've seen, there is a part of you. They set this up well to where the audience wants them to get away.
Yes.
You still want them to get away, even after all of this, because you have traveled with them throughout this whole movie. We barely leave their side. There's a couple cutscenes away with the cop. But other than that, you are with one of these ladies all the time throughout this whole movie, which helps you just stay connected with them constantly. And you want them to get away, but you know how this is going to probably play out. But you're fooling yourself because you've grown attached to these characters and seen the hell they've gone through.
Yeah, but once they split up, once they go their separate ways for reasons of just, they literally cannot, Cleo does a really good kind of self-sacrifice play to where she like dips into a tunnel, and she's like, you guys can get out now. That way the cops still think they're all in the car, at least for long enough for those other two to get away. But when the group is, you could already say, is broken up because one of them has died, but you still are like, no, stay together. But as soon as let's split up, you're like, oh man. Part of you goes, one of them's gonna make it. I know one of them's gonna make it. Like, hopefully they all make it, but I mean, Cleo gives that thing. You know, Cleo's gonna just go out in a blaze. They're setting up for like an amazing scene.
Oh,
And
yeah, when she stops the car and tells him to get out, you're like, oh, that's it.
yes,
But she gets her chance to shine. Holy crap. She nearly crashes into a helicopter, causes them to veer off, crashes through a barricade, gets shot up, waits till they're close enough, then comes out guns blazing.
dude,
It,
she does a Bonnie and Clyde and a Scarface within
she
just a
does.
minute or so.
It's an intense scene and it's heartbreaking because again, even for the Cleo character, I if I've been saying Chloe, Cleo character, um, you still feel for her too, even though she's been the the instigator, the enabler, you still feel for her.
Yeah, and to show there's a shot where after they just fully unload on that car, after she busts through the barricade and they're like, "That's it, you're dead," and they put full holes. Gary just has this slow shot of her car, like kind of slowly stopping, and they get that wide shot of the side of it and the rims and everything else. This wonderful, nice car that she finally got, and it's a great, great symbolism there. Like, you know, this they had mentioned earlier in the movie, you've had this car since high school and you've been fixing it up. It's a piece of junk. It's old. She
Mm-hmm.
finally got the whole thing tricked out, and so for him to like focus on that, you don't get a shot of her in the car getting shut up. You don't see that. In fact, they barely show the top of her head to acknowledge that she's no longer really driving this car. But you think she's dead there because he gave her that dramatic moment, and he could have let her have it there, but not for Cleo.
No.
Jumps out, wham! She does all Tony Montana. It's just like, Rob Zombie wished he could have done that in Devil's Rejects, and given it some real weight. Gosh, she's just, you
Well,
know,
and even all shot up, she refuses to fall.
yes.
She's hanging on to the door of the car after all shot up. And if she had an ounce yet, she would be still shooting people as she goes down. She holds on.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a very, if you're going to glorify, I don't even say glorify, you want to tie up every character in the best kind of possible way, and to that, Cleo deserved that setup. She really did. And interestingly enough, the gay character in the film too, you
Mm-hmm.
know, which there was a lot of misogyny in hip hop culture around that time too. So for her to be given that kind of a send off, I think was interesting given the times.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Well, it is 90s. I mean, the music in here, you know, and some of the clothing and style and especially the dialogue definitely all screams 90s.
Very 90s. They had a In Vogue song during the love scene.
Yes.
Yeah, you got to do it.
But I won't complain. It's in vogue, It's,
You had to.
you had to. I mean, yeah, you got to include it in there. But then what I also thought it was interesting is because the person who ends up surviving out of our quartet is not quite the person you think because of the way this movie started. Because Frankie and Stony are left then, and they split up, and we see Stony, and she's very quick on her feet on how to get away. She hides amongst a bunch of old folks headed to Mexico.
Yeah, she jumps on that bus.
The tour bus.
Yeah.
But it was also heartbreaking because you're sitting there going, okay, and then what about Frankie? Because we saw Frankie go through some shit at the beginning of the movie. And then that bus drives by and you see Frankie standing there with all the cops pointing at her, and you're like, fuck.
But Frankie is not going to give up though.
Oh, hell no. God, that scene when she pulls the gun and puts it on the cop who's been, feeling guilty and trying to talk him down this whole time after their first encounter, and she just throws his words back in his face.
From that very first scene where he degraded her, she does it right back.
And you could see it in his face, knowing exactly. He's like, shit. He's like,
She's got that same fire she had, man, in that opening scene when she let her boss have it. She's not going to go out. She's not going to go out without, getting that.
No, and at this point too, this point in the movie, we're near the end, she's gotten even harder. I mean, she's even gotten more, just this is the shit right here.
Yes.
And this, that's heartbreaking as well, because who's the first person to shoot her? His
Yep.
partner.
Yep.
And I did like the fact, because I was wondering whether or not they were going to have him look at the bus and notice that Stoney was there. And at first I thought, oh, maybe they won't. But then you do see he notices her there and says nothing.
Well, he knows that they've gone far enough,
Yeah.
and he knows that they kind of owe her, because of who that was. I think, if it had been reversed or whatever, or if, Frankie or Cleo had been on the bus, maybe it would have panned out a little different, but he feels bad still for them having murdered her brother. And so I feel like that was that figured in his decision to let her go.
Oh yeah, it definitely did, because he had been carried that weight of that guilt of the death of her brother throughout the rest of the film after it happened. And yeah, and that, again, a great setup. That everything in this script is, I thought, was really well thought out, because there's that setup of motivation for all the characters, including the jerkwad white cop who lets her go. You've got the motivation of why he's doing it. It's not just a Hollywood thing. He's been carrying this, and like you said, he owes her one, at least. So,
Yeah.
So he lets Stoney go, and that is not the person who I thought would have survived this whole thing.
No, no. But when it shows her on the bus, driving away and looking out the window and stuff. This is a scene that we get in a lot of movies kind of near the end, and of course someone's either near a mirror or a window, kind of, just sort of like that literal self-reflection that you've got there. But it made me think about Midnight Cowboy, and every time I watch Midnight Cowboy and, Ratso's on the bus, I'm thinking, this time he's going to live to get to Miami. He's not, this time he's going to. Every time I've watched it, he didn't make it. Every time I watch it, I think, okay, this time he's gonna, because I'm so invested by the end.
Yeah.
I'm like, so all you really hope at that point is like, please let Frankie get away, or not Frankie. Please let Stoney get away, and let her not get caught when she gets to where she's going. And what's great is she cuts her hair, she shaves her head, and then she looks like she did in Demon Knight.
Yes.
Except for with not blonde hair.
Right. Oh God, I loved her in Demon Knight.
She's awesome.
That's another that's another fun movie.
Yeah, what's neat is that Jada and Queen Latifah ended up in Girls Trip this past summer, which I know you saw.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, yeah. That they were back with each other.
Set It Off mini reunion in that movie.
Yeah. So, oh man. So I think we broke down this film fairly well. Andrew, was there something or you wanted to bring up we didn't touch on, you wanted to talk about at all?
Well, I just like, I was thinking like, is it obvious that women wrote this movie? Because two women wrote the screenplay.
You know what? I'm going to say it was, only because, and I've noticed this in other indie films, and I talked to, and I'll get to my answer in a second. Sorry for a little roundabout, but I just want to set up that I talked to a female director recently of the horror film Ice Cream Truck, and she wrote the screenplay as well. And where I'm going with is, female screenplays, you can usually tell were written by women because the interaction of the female characters feels realistic.
They did, and all that camaraderie is great, but it also reminded me a bit of the camaraderie, and maybe it's just because they're smoking weed in a couple of the scenes, but it made me think of Friday with Craig and Smokey out on the porch. You felt that real kind of closeness with them, and F. Gary Gray, whereas he's gifted with action definitely, and suspense and all of that, great with comedy still, and balancing all of that out.
Oh, you get some humorous moments with them, but for sure in this film,
real, like real friends.
It's heavy, but yeah, they felt like real friends. And you could tell, I think, that it was female screenplay writers on this just because of the interaction among the female characters. It it always just feels more realistic when it's written by a female for obvious reasons, of course,
Yeah,
but
because they're not as stereotyped and idealized, and but I also want to know, um, because we were, Black Panther is the conversation of the moment with film right now. Um, do you feel like movies like Set It Off need to be made, or will be made, or should be made, presently or in the future?
I
Or is
think
it kind of time for them to have already tell enough stories like this and go on to tell different types of stories when it comes to, films about black characters?
I think with the times the way they are, it really depends on the story yet to tell. I mean, there's always stories to tell.
Mhm.
Um, but one like Set It Off, do we need one exactly like this? I'm not really the one to make that call. I think they should still be made because for obvious reasons, you look at the movie Set It Off and the situations that the characters are put in are still problems today.
Yeah, I was thinking that same thing too. Like um this was in 96. This was way before, the economic disasters that
Hmm.
we were going to face. And so um, I just feel like as long as people are in desperate situations and doing things like that, stories like this are always going to speak to them no matter who they are. And I still think we're nowhere near where we need to be in terms of films about women necessarily, and about them working together, definitely. And so, thinking about it now, though, I'm just like, not told maybe the exact way because it was done so much back then. You don't see a lot of movies like this now. But yeah, I don't. I'm kind of on the fence of it as to whether or not if Set It Off were announced to be remade, how that would get responded to.
It's going to be approached differently just because filmmaking in general is taken such the least wide release. It seems big production type filmmaking seems to have taken a different turn and approach to things that I think they'd be approached differently. I think there's still stories to tell. Again, I'm not exactly the qualified person to say it. I'm putting that out right now, but I still think stories like this need to be told. They not exactly this way, maybe
Mhm.
a slightly different approach, but I think they're still out there that need to be told and addressed and help keep these topics still obviously in the forefront because they still need to be dealt with because they haven't obviously been in 20 years.
Yeah, and not necessarily package it up in a fantasy to where you're dealing with allegory and metaphor.
Right. Right. Because while that's makes for some creative film work, sometimes you need it right in your face.
Yeah.
So yeah, good questions, man. I'm
Okay.
not quite sure, but I know if there was one made, I go see it.
Yeah, me too. I mean, I'm always a fan of the female ensemble, and especially seeing them do something unusual. And I still feel like even today, Set It Off, not only does it still work, but it's still kind of an unusual film.
Well, yeah, because you don't have the girl, even when they do have a conflict, it doesn't last that long. And amends are made versus sometimes you get this where there's still the grudge throughout the whole group constantly, you know.
Yeah, the only time one of them pulls a gun on the other, the way that that is resolved is way different than I think it would be resolved in a film where men are doing the same thing.
Hmm. Yeah. Oh, I agree. I was impressed that the way they set it up to be resolved. I'm like, okay, yeah, I'm good with this. You know?
Yeah.
So, so we'll wrap it up here for the night. I hope our listeners enjoyed our conversation on Set It Off. If you haven't seen this film, even though we spoiled a lot of it, I suggest you still watch it because there's still plenty of stuff in here. And if nothing else, for the performance of these very talented individuals who are in the film, I think these four ladies were fantastic in it, and we're the right casting personally for it. And yeah, I'd recommend it. How about you, Andrew?
Absolutely, man. Cool music, way better than people think it might be. And definitely, F. Gary Gray is a great director, but he also put together, like I said, wonderful cast. These people are all very, very talented. And, just watching it, you're just riveted from beginning to end. I don't think enough people have seen it. And definitely, I don't think enough people are talking about it. And it definitely, when it comes to 90s movies, is really, really unique from that time.
And it's still topical today.
Yes,
So,
absolutely.
oh, good or bad, it's still topical today.
Yes, it is.
So I want to thank you, Andrew, for joining me again for talking about a film like this. It's been fun discussions. These are some really interesting films that I hope people check out, and we got you interested in it. And now here's the point of the podcast where you get to hear where you can hear my guest when he's not here talking to me in the spoiler room. So Andrew, go ahead. Where can they find you at and your stuff at?
Oh man, hey everybody. So I fans have set it off not necessarily. I don't know if they would be into the movies I make or not, but we have female centric movies my friends and I here in Athens, Georgia make, and they are all over Amazon Prime for you to check out. Just search GONZORIFFIC, Gonzorific, and you don't even have to like really watch them if you don't like. Just let them play in your house. You can contribute to low budget filmmaking just by streaming our movies. You don't even have to pay attention to them. The beauty of it.
Play them in the background.
Yeah, play them all the time, dude. Play 'em all the time. Play them at your friend's house too. It's like, hey man, instead of listening to this Carrot Top album again, can we just play these movies? Just for background.
I don't know if anyone listens to Carrot Top albums, but
Well, they're not gonna let you know. But anyway, yeah, man,
no.
they're female centric films and definitely made by a bunch of bunch of people interested in some feminist propaganda. So maybe it relates a little bit to the topic.
So check out the good stuff, all fun, entertaining, interesting stuff. Not as heavy as Set It Off, but still fun cinema. So thank you, Andrew, and thank you to our one listener who has been with us all night. We appreciate you tuning in. And yeah, Andrew, let's say good night, sir.
Good night. Man, I'm still thinking about Cleo on top of that car with that girl.